Welcome, Wheel of Time friends and fans. We've just watched episode 5, and there's a lot of stuff going on. Let's go into it. It starts with a burial ceremony, and we get introduced to the fact that Stepan, the warder of one of the people who died, when we see is quite like I haven't counted it, but it seems like between 15 and 20 people or something like that have died. And he is in a really bad state to start with, and it's not getting better.
Yes, and indeed he is. So he has to bury Karin. He was his warder, and yeah, it's very sad. So we see that the bond between the two maybe even enhances his grief, and he looks even very ill himself.
I mean, this is a spoiler review, obviously.
Yes.
If you haven't realized, so we go right into his story, and that ends really, really badly. We see him gradually get worse and worse. He tries to use alcohol and some other drugs, and eventually ends up killing himself. And what we learn from this, I think, is how deep that bond is, how important that bond is. So I think that might become important later on, either with Lan, who is the other warder to whom we have created sort of a relationship by now, or perhaps if one of the other female characters who may become an Aes Sedai, especially Nynaeve. Say again. I'm still wrong.
Nynaeve. I always have difficulty as well.
Okay, once more, please. Say again once more.
Nynaeve.
Okay. Nynaeve. She will probably eventually have a warder, and this might end up being one of the characters we know. So that tells us how important that bond is. It may also be because Lan may get into a conflict with his bond, because there was a suggestion that maybe Nynaeve
yes.
is falling for him, and the question is, what are his feelings? Obviously, they have almost like a platonic love relationship to their Aes Sedai, but at the same time doesn't mean they can't have other feelings as well.
Yeah, so
we don't know about that.
Very interesting was the second burial rite of funeral rite. So we have another one, and while Lan is told by the chief warder to take away the grief for all by putting his hand on the body of Stepin, we see that while he is obviously in pain, he's crying in pain, and we see Moraine, she's in pain as well, and we cannot be sure whether it is because of the dead Stepin, or rather, which I think, that she is in pain because Lan is in pain. And we also see, and that's very interesting, beside Moraine, there is Nynaeve standing, and she's in grief as well. And so we can wonder if she's in love with him, if there is already some sort of bond which she is empathically feeling as well, his pain. So it's an interpretation.
I don't know about a bond, because I mean, he already has a bond with another Aes Sedai, but probably more like a love connection. If that is true, she might feel with him very strongly. And for him, this was like so obviously there was a strong connection between the two warders.
And between maybe between all warders, because everybody felt with him, but he was the one to take the burden. So that was my impression. Yes.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We don't know about that yet, but it is a very interesting point. What other connections may there be? And going to that, I mean, there was this interesting details before this. He was melting Stepin was melting the ring, so there's another, interesting symbolic aspect. I just want to briefly mention that this reminded me a little bit to the ceremony that is done when there is a new pope. The ring of the old pope is being destroyed, and I wonder if that has influenced. There's a lot of details that may have come from all kinds of rituals and cultures. The hitting on the chest also reminded me of another ceremony. I wonder where all these little bits came from. There's all kind of subtle references in Robert Jordan's work, also with a lot of names, like the festival that they had in the first or second episode.
Beltane.
Beltane, yeah.
Beltane, not Beltane.
It sounds very much like Beltane to me,
It does. It does.
So he seems to make all those references, and I think that may be valuable to look out for those references.
Absolutely. And I'd like to add something regarding the ring, because it was an all-male ritual to melt the ring. So I wondered there were no women there, no Aes Sedai there. And also it reminded me of, sorry for that, of the Lord of the Rings in the melting of the One Ring. So
yeah, it is a good point. Yes, very much so. And I think it's pretty certain that Robert Jordan was strongly influenced by the Lord of the Rings, and that's not wrong. I mean, it's not meant as a criticism when we occasionally make references to this, because I mean, every fantasy writer has been, and I suppose even should have been, influenced by the Lord of the Rings. Doesn't mean you have to copy it, but I mean, this was pretty much the father of modern fantasy, So yes. Obviously he was influenced, and I mean, that's all fair to say.
Yes, indeed.
But talking about the whole context about the what happens in the White Tower, we learned a lot more details about what's going on. There's apparently strong politics. We know there are several groups here, and from the intro scene, we can gather that there are at least, 6 groups of colors. We learned that the yellow group seems to be interested in healing. The red ones are interested in clearly rules of one type or another. That was pretty obviously described.
Reinforcing rules, yes.
Reinforcing rules. And Lindrain apparently becomes one of the most powerful people in the White Tower, and she's gaining more and more influence. And there is this one scene where she is being warned by Moraine that the politics might break her, and she's warned to keep out of that.
Nynaeve is warned.
Sorry, I didn't say that. Nynaeve is warned, and we already see that Liandrin, apparently sort of a leader of the Reds or something like that, is trying to get her into her order or whatever it is, her group.
Yes. One thing I found is very interesting, because on this procession, when they bring Logain as a prisoner into the White Tower, we see that Liandrin is on a seat on this carriage, and Alanna is also on this seat. So they both seem to have the honor of having brought Logain, but it is Alanna who speaks to Moraine, and she warns her. And she tells her, "You've been away so long, you don't know what happened here. Be careful." And I wondered why, because at one point Moraine told Nynaeve, "If your 4 friends are here, we'll find them. I will be informed. I have eyes and ears everywhere." And I thought, it's interesting. How can she be sure she still has her eyes and ears. Maybe things happened also to her
influence, her sources. Yes.
yes.
We don't know yet about that, but it's an interesting thought. What is her connection? And we also learned that she is the only one who can challenge
one of the few who can challenge the Amelin.
One of the few. I'm not sure, but I think I even heard the only one, pretty much.
No,
one of the few.
One of the few. I noted it down. Yes.
Okay, good to know.
One of the few.
She's one of the few who can challenge the
Amelin,
who's known also as Siwan Sanshin or something like that.
Yes, and Moraine says that the Amelin would not turn against the sister without a good cause. So she believes in the righteousness.
Yeah, and that's not so sure. We don't know what kind of figure that is. We haven't, at least not that I know of, met that person, but she's apparently becoming more of a presence.
But Moraine trusts in her, so that we know.
Yeah, well, but she's warned that she's actually an enemy. She's warned that she might be considered as an enemy by two people. So that seems to be.
And we heard it before that she's not very much liked. So yes,
not very welcome there, at least not from that perspective. Yes, I think that is a very important point. So
absolutely,
we get this insight into the politics. Everybody tries to seemingly get the novices who are powerful on their side. So that's part of the internal politics. But then Nynaeve doesn't, she's been advised to kind of leave this secluded place that Moraine tried to put her in for her own safety. And they meet this ogre or Ogier or whatever he calls himself.
Ogier, yeah.
This interesting guy who doesn't come across like an ogre in the way I see them, like a man-eating monster, but he seems to be quite civilized and educated. Anyway, he helps her to find her other two friends, Rand and Matt. And we see this interesting scene when this procession comes in already. That Matt has this very early in the scene. He has this tendency towards aggression, and then the false dragon Logan, he looks at him and he kind of begins to laugh, and it's pretty obvious that he is able to channel. I mean, this is still kind of left half in doubt, but it seems to be to the viewer, it seems to be pretty clear, and also that he's kind of slowly turning evil, even though there's still some part of him, and we don't know how long that will remain, or whether it will perhaps prevail, hopefully.
Although I think when he saw Logan laugh, I think maybe it was an hallucination, because in the next scene we see Logan with a neutral face. So I wondered whether this was, and in this moment,
it might be in his mind. That's an interesting point.
Yes,
it might be
because
just in
at that moment, there was some kind of noise in his ear. So
that's interesting. When we were rewatching that, in any case, we see that some darkness tends to sort of possess him in some form, but he's also trying to fight back, and he makes this pact, this promise with Rand that he doesn't want to turn into this. So there's some good in him as well. At the same time, it kind of felt to me, we have this, a lot of this good evil polarity in the whole series, and there seems to be interesting that these two characters, Rand and Matt, are together, and they seem to have this polarity. Rand tends to be like the noble good guy, and Matt tends to be the kind of trickster and evil guy. And if I may add a little spoiler from the book here that I'm starting to read right now, in the book, the impression that we discussed earlier, that Matt is a little bit of a trickster character, is even more poignant. In the very early chapters, it's described that he always uses to play little tricks on the village, so that everybody, whenever something goes wrong, they think, oh, this is Matt. So that trickster quality is already very, very strong.
Okay.
And knowing how much Robert Jordan has borrowed from mythology and from all kinds of concepts, and given that one of the characters is called Thor, after all, Randall Thor. I mean, Thor seems to be the second name, so that applies to his whole family. But still, you know, I think of this Thor Loki polarity here. We have the good guy, the noble guy, and we have the trickster, who also tends to kind of turn evil, but there's a little bit of good in him, as is in Loki. So I think that's a very interesting polarity that we are presented here, and I wonder where that's going.
Indeed. So I guess maybe everybody got some kind of companion who could help them along, as well as Egwene and Perrin with the Tinkers. So Perrin is sort of healed, and his healing process by now in this episode is completed in a way, because he has to suffer from the White Coat, from this child, what's his name? Child Balder. He fancies to be called, and so he's tortured by him, and he also admits to Egwene that he killed his wife, and she sort of consoles him, and then she manages to set them both free, and also the wolves come along. So
I'm not entirely sure about that.
You're not?
She tried to attack this dude, and pretty much didn't master enough. I mean, there was like a, you know, not a level 1, a level 0 fireball that she tried to conjure up using a role-playing terminology, and that really did nothing to him. Or maybe he has some protection against magic.
But did you see Perrin's eyes? He had golden eyes.
Yes, I was just gonna go to this, but I don't think that's her. I don't think that's necessarily her. He didn't have golden eyes, in my view. No, I mean, her fireball was golden. I thought he was having yellow eyes, like the wolves. And remember what we said the last time, maybe there's a connection. And he frees himself. That's how I interpreted it. He frees himself through some kind of, you know, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this is some werewolf power that he has, you know. And then the wolves came to kill pretty much everybody else and free them. And also, when this happens, this guy who clearly, this Inquisitor, I'm gonna call him an Inquisitor, the White Cloak, this child asshole. Sorry for saying that, but he is, you know, clearly.
It's okay.
Thank you for forgiving me. I feel absolved now. Okay, well, so this guy, I think he probably knows about magic and about supernatural stuff, and he really gets scared. He wasn't so afraid of the you know, he's not so afraid of Aes Sedai because he's used fighting them. But when Matt turned into whatever he turned into, he was like, oh shit, you know.
Yes, what are
light
you?
Help me, or whatever he called.
Yes,
you know?
What are you? Light, help me. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he really gets scared.
Okay. I think you're right here with the wolves. Yes.
Yeah, and so I think he did really make this connection with the wolves of some sort. Whether that has anything to do with the scratches he got and the wound he got earlier from the Trollocs, I do not know. But for one reason or another, and maybe it just turns out that he had this, maybe, I don't know, he was born a werewolf and he just didn't know, or whatever. I mean, we don't yet know where this is coming from, but clearly there is this connection. And by now, I mean, he also knows that this wolf is not going to hurt him. So I think by now we can be sure he has that connection to the wolves and he has some wolfish power or some power himself. That's how it seemed to me. So I think that's very interesting. So we have maybe all of the characters has something to them, you know, like we don't know yet about Ran, but he's still, for me, a candidate for being the one dragon, even though Nynaeve is also a candidate, even though Egwene could also be a candidate. I think Matt pretty much, unless there's some weird story to this, he doesn't seem to be ending up being one of the good guys. I mean, unless he overcomes this, and this is his transformation that brings out the good in him. But he seems to be more like on a dark path, at least right now.
Yes.
And Perrin seems to be also not the dragon. He seems to be more the wolf. But that kind of leaves everybody with some sort of power.
Indeed,
so they're,
yes.
they're all not ordinary people, you know.
So this episode is called Blood Calls Blood, and we know that Two Rivers is a very special place because the Manetheren king and queen sort of gave themselves into the land. So the blood from this battle, from this terrible battle, went into the land, and somehow they seem to have all very much power in some way or other.
Yeah.
So even Egwene has some sort of command and can channel the one force.
And we hear this interesting story about her in that when she was really young, she broke the fever that was supposed to break her. So
Yes.
that's also interesting. And she instinctively knew not to drink this, basically this tea, which basically was poison.
Yes.
So there's something to her as well. So
and we also
yeah.
And we also learn about Rand, because I wondered last time his father can fight. So they are warriors. And I wondered what kind of story is behind this. And now we know, because he is an Aiel. So even the Aiel.
What exactly is that?
The Aiel, we met the one Aiel before, because that was a dead man in the cage where Matt and Tom Marilyn, they went to this guy, and Tom Marilyn said that the Aiel had been murdered cowardly, because they are warriors and they have a cloth, and if they put the cloth, just like ninjas probably, if they put the cloth in front of their faces, they are on a killing mission. But he didn't, so he was not on a killing mission. He was harmless to the people, but they cowardly murdered him. That was what we know from Tom Marilyn.
Kind of interesting. That's kind of interesting.
And he had red hair. Yes. So red hair seems to be a sign, because the Ogier loyal noted this, said red hair from Two Rivers. Well, that's a strange story. This is art. I like art stories. So he seems to me like a bit of a librarian who knows really much, because we meet him in the library sort of place.
So very interesting.
Yes. So this could explain that they can fight.
Yeah. Also, that reminds me that we now know that Tom is dead.
Do we know this?
Yes, it was mentioned.
Matt said he was dead, but he's not in a position to know. So I wondered, why does he say?
I mean, he might have still got it wrong, and he might still turn out not to be dead. But at least the two characters whom he saved believe that he is dead. So he didn't,
Yes.
I would normally expect, if he had survived, he'd, follow them and probably catch up with them.
Maybe, but maybe
we don't know that for sure. No, you're right. We don't know that for sure, but
we cannot for sure.
Where the viewer is strongly convinced, or it is suggested that Tom is dead. So if he came back again, it would be a bit of a surprise. So
yes.
It's still, from all I've seen, not entirely possible. It's a bit reminds me of the of Game of Thrones with the water dance, where everybody kind of felt like, spoiler here by the way, maybe he survived because we didn't really see him being killed.
Yes.
But he never really came back.
Yes.
So I'm not getting my hopes up here.
So another thing we're tricked into believing is that after the last episode's end, we could have thought that Nynaeve would be the next dragon, but now it seems that she is more or less recognized as having the power to channel and will be accepted as a novice to the Aes Sedai, but nobody said anything about her being the dragon. So maybe that's
the line of thought is being dropped.
It's
So
yes,
it doesn't,
it's suggested. Yes.
it's not clear. I think, you know, without using any knowledge from the book, it seems still that we have three more or less hot candidates. It's the two women, and Rand. And Rand's the only one who so far hasn't really shown any special powers. I said everybody has a power, but other than being a warrior, you know, and other than being probably the person who strikes me as the most ethical or one so far, or at least the one that's most obviously ethical. Well, maybe in a way as well.
Nynaeve, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Egwene, I don't know. You know,
We have to
yeah,
find
well, I
out.
mean, you know, even actually, even in a way, she had this. There was this conversation in the beginning where I wondered, like, is she getting a little arrogant when she said, "Oh, if I'm so powerful, people should be afraid of me"? Is that going to her head? I don't know. So let's see how that turns out.
Yes, so Moraine seemed to interpret this statement that she's being afraid.
Yeah, it's just
So
overcompensation of fear, and it might be the case.
Might be the case, yes.
Or not. We will see about that. But it would be a way to indicate, you know, giving us like a foreshadowing of how she might react to the powers he gets.
Yes. One thing about Rand, because you said, and you are right with it, that he so far has not shown any special powers. But when he sees the mountain and the White Tower, he says, "I've seen this mountain before." So maybe this is something like a hint.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yes, and the mountain, not the White Tower.
The mountain.
Yeah.
The mountain. I thought maybe it was a volcano, because Matt said when they entered the city, this is blood and ashes. And on top of the mountain, there was white smoke, and I don't know whether volcanoes do so, or
yeah.
maybe
It's certainly very interesting, and you get reminded of a Lord of the Rings again.
yes.
But well,
a mountain of doom or of fate.
Yeah. What about
maybe,
this mountain?
Maybe
we don't know that yet.
Really interesting is Loyal, isn't he? So he turns up. He's not obviously not a normal human being. And then it turns out he's an ogre. He seems to know a lot about books, and he apparently knows. So there's this one scene where Rand holds up this book, and this book is something which reminded me of Strider of Aragorn from a Lord of the Rings again. So there's a book of Fast Rider, I guess, Jane Fast Rider book, and
some adventure story, apparently.
Some adventure stories, right?
It made him think of Egwene.
And Loyal knew that he thought of Egwene. He was even able to fetch her, to go to the, so he's allowed to the White Grounds. So
and he seems to be a special character, sort of. I mean, it was hinted that he might be very old because he says humans grow up so quickly. So maybe he has a different perception of time, and maybe much older than, I mean, I don't know how old he looks anyway, because he's a different race, but I mean,
and he's, yes, and he strikes us as a phlegmatic, right?
Yes, very much.
He's very phlegmatic, very slow, but also thorough. So
yeah,
he seems
preparing
to be
himself to whatever he thinks he needs to prepare himself. Yes. Yeah, very interesting. I'm looking forward to the next. Yeah, sorry, you still want to add something?
Yes, I wondered about his name, because Loyal means faithful. So it's phonetically very similar to
phonetically.
Loyal.
Yeah, I think that's true. So it may also be a character description. So what are you looking forward? What's your big questions for the next episode?
Yeah, so I look very much forward to see the other colors of the Aes Sedai and what they do. In one of the bonus trailers, we found there's violet ones and so on. So this is what I'm looking forward to. Also to see the seat of now I'm fighting for words. Emmeline. So the Emmeline seat, the lady who rules them all. And what about Moraine and her standing? And of course, what will happen to Matt? What will happen to Rand? And how will they all get together? So this would be very interesting. I hope so, at least.
Yeah. I think so too. It's very interesting. So we didn't hear anything more about the evil forces. The only thing they were mentioned indirectly when this white cloak dude, this child Valda, mentioned that in his belief, the one power is just a version of dark power, so it's all evil, and he wants to eradicate that from the world, which I guess from his perspective makes sense. But we didn't hear them. So what are they doing meanwhile? You know, what are these fades, these eyeless ones doing meanwhile? What happened to the Trollocs? Where are they? So we don't know anything about that.
Yes,
that's the one thing that I expect to hear more about. And what are the politics in the White Tower? What other fractions exist there? That would be very interesting. Of course, what happens to Matt? What happens also to Perrin? What is he going to maybe turn into? Probably a question that's relevant to both. And of course, something needs to happen to Rand. He needs to become more relevant, because so far he has not really any, as I said, he has no power. He's just, you know, I mean, he could become a warder, I guess, you know, if nothing else. But somehow he needs to get his position. And we also heard about the possibility of releasing a bond. You know, Moraine was thinking about doing that with Lan, which again brings another spin to the possible love relationship that he might have
with Egwene. Nynaeve, sorry.
It was Nynaeve.
Yes.
So
indeed.
that's also interesting. So what happens to all these things? Yes, very interesting. Looking forward to all of these.
Definitely. And I'm looking forward also to some secrets about Moraine revealed, because we see she opens something up, like a little cupboard. I'm sure it's not the right name, shrine probably. And there's a photo, a picture of a woman seen from behind. And she's in blue dress, so she's also of her kind. And she sort of seems to look out of a window or into something similar, another shrine maybe. So this seems to be of some importance to her.
Yeah.
So what does it mean? Maybe this is
it was clearly hinted that she does have secrets. Yes, so we want to hear more about those secrets.
And she's quite impersonal, isn't it? So Anna, she referred to her empty room as an impersonal room. So she does not have to have a personality. So she probably lives for her goal, for, you know.
Yeah, but what are her secrets? That's really the question. What are her secrets? What's going on with her? And I'm curious, what are the things that our viewers are mostly interested in?
Yes.
I also want to say thank you for the people who have already commented on our last videos and given us their thoughts. Some people who read the books and some people who haven't. We really appreciate every comment, and we will try to answer every comment. If you haven't already done so, we will do so soon. And we're looking forward to your thoughts. And also, please support this young channel with your subscription. Click on the bell and give us your like. And we're looking forward to connect with you again when we review the next episode. Thank you very much for viewing, and
see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.